have Veselka for the pierogies. We got to go to Venero's for those cannolis, and then we got to go to the hot dog place for whatever that concoction you told her. And we're going to get the big bottle of Pepto-Bismol.
Welcome to the John and Jonathan Sell NYC podcast, where experienced expert New York City real estate brokers John Gasdaska and Jonathan Conlon break down what's happening in the market, what you need to know whether you're a buyer, seller, or agent, and their insight into the future with a little bit of fun along the way. In this episode, John and Jonathan discuss everything you need to know about living in Greenwich Village or in the East Village, including restaurants, schools, theaters, parks, attractions, and more.
Well, welcome back, everybody, to the John and Jonathan Sell NYC podcast. How you doing, John?
Pretty good, Jonathan. Yourself?
Good.
I have no complaints today.
You look so business. That's so nice.
I purposely wore the tie.
I was wearing a full suit today, and I got home, and I was like, couldn't wait to get it on. So you get me in my
I'm working here.
I'm working here. So another week has passed. We have still avoided any further shutdown with the schools and everything else.
So far, so good.
So far, so good. So today we're gonna cover another neighborhood. We're gonna talk about, of course, the market insights and our takeaways, and then we are going to cover two neighborhoods today in one. It's a double banger: the Greenwich Village and my beloved East Village, my home for 6 years. So when in an earlier life, a previous life of mine, when going out at night and socializing was a thing, both personally.
That's when you were a wild man.
Oh, it was crazy times. But first and foremost, John, how was your week? What do you have going on? What do you see? What's your takeaway in the market stats? And I don't know, you tell me.
Okay, well, I think we're going to both be on the same page with saying that, activity continues, and we've remained very busy. And when I say that, we have slowly but surely offers being made and contracts going out on select apartments that have been reduced accordingly. But if we look at the weekly contracts between last week and the week before, we're starting to see a little bit more movement in the price categories. So when I said, I think last week it was around 92% of the transactions were under the price of $3 million. Okay, with about half of those under $1 million. Now the market's changing a bit. So contracts are going to be slightly up 6% week over week, and similar to year over year. But the prices are, the buyers going into the larger apartments, we're starting to see more of them, if that makes any sense. So we have only 85% of the contract signs below $3 million. So, and with more contracts being done in the 3 to 5 and the $5 to $10 million range. So what tells me is higher end buyers are slowly coming into the marketplace. And right now, as we approach Thanksgiving, I'm busier than ever in terms of the buyers who are looking at the real estate and wanting to possibly, not only are they considering this the bottom of the market, but they want to get into the market. So That's what I'm seeing. I'm pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, we both have a number of different buyers that we're working with that are, we have buyers that are thinking, you know what, now that we're starting to see some more stability. We had another announcement of Moderna announcing the vaccine.
That's been big. Yeah.
Big news. So all of those little things, I think, for the big, heavily liberal and democratic city like New York City, and as is the case in most big metropolitan towns, with Biden winning, depending on, it doesn't matter what side of the fence you're on in a big town that leans liberal, that's a positive for our market as a whole. Again, politics aside, either way, we're through the presidential election. I think at this point we can say that we have probably a winner and announced and confirmed, hopefully. And that is the point, is that we're through that. And now we need to get through the winter so that the fears wrapped around the winter time of people being inside and such are kind of behind us. But certainly the vaccines are a big welcome bit of information. And hopefully by the end of the year, we have some approved vaccines, and that's just a matter of distribution, which of course is no easy task, but at least people know, okay, we have it coming, and that will be a big stabilizing force in our market. And cumulatively, sales over the past 14 weeks are up 7% from last year. So that's certainly a welcome thing. And we were talking before, the number one trend is that people are still buying Manhattan real estate. And that's
exactly.
really, only expecting, of course, we're coming into the holidays. So there is the caveat that people are going to be focusing elsewhere. That always draws people's attention away. It's weird and strange to think about, what the holidays are going to be like, given the current situation, because it really shouldn't be what it normally is, which is a big gatherings of family members and such. So how is that going to affect? So perhaps we won't see as much of a slowdown. Maybe we'll see more of a slowdown. It's really tough to say, as we've talked about throughout here, just given the strangeness of the world right now.
But one thing that I just want to add to that is that I think that, again, COVID or the vaccine is really what I think the positiveness of the vaccine is really generating more people going into the marketplace in Manhattan. And with the promise that, life will become back to normal next year. And then the other thing is that we look at the unit mix and we see the 3 and the 4 bedroom market, particularly these larger apartments, which are going to contract. What kind of price they're going to contract out is yet to know, because we have that delay. But that's good that the bigger apartments are starting to trade. That tells us that sellers are getting more realistic in their pricing.
So where is the Village? So the East Village, which is from the East River, from 14th Street on the north side, Houston, which is just south of First Street, the next street south of First Street, from the East River, so that runs up the east side of Manhattan, the island of Manhattan, and then over to 4th Avenue is the East Village, same north and south borders, over to the Greenwich Village, which goes from 4th Avenue over to 7th Avenue. So it's close to my heart because I spent my younger days for 6 years, my core of my 20s, running around the East Village. And it's certainly a fun neighborhood. It's a young neighborhood typically, although there is an element of a lot of rent-stabilized, rent-controlled tenants that have been there forever, that have been in that neighborhood when it was a little bit more dangerous to live in. I moved in 2002 after a short stint in Park Slope, and lived there till 2008. By 2002, it was already pretty cleaned up, pretty safe, et cetera. But there's a lot of fun things to do and a lot of interesting things to see, that's for sure, which we'll talk about.
So let's talk a little bit about the history, shall we? About Greenwich Village and the East Village. So throughout the 20th century, Greenwich Village has been, I would say, known as a very bohemian Mecca, if you want to call it that. The birthplace, particularly the East Village, of countercultural movement in the 60s. And overall, it has been known as a sanctuary for artists. And the East Village, I always like to say, because I'm there a heck of a lot longer in Manhattan than you are, since the late 80s, was always the East Village was very grungy. And that kind of punk rock phase, and it still has some very eclectic bars and some wonderful eateries that we'll talk about in a minute. And it attracts a tremendous amount of young people. So there are, again, as we talked about in the West Village, a lot of historic buildings in Greenwich Village. I guess in Central Village, the old St. Vincent's Hospital that is now the Greenwich Lane condominium, but they transform this hospital into what's one of the iconic luxury condominium buildings down in Greenwich Village. But we have the oldest remaining house, the Isaac Hendricks House, having been built in 1799 in Greenwich Village. We talked about the Stonewall Inn, one of the most historic bars in all of Manhattan, right off of 7th Avenue, east of 7th Avenue, which would be considered right in the heart of Greenwich Village.
It's on the to us talking about it last week in the West Village. It gets mentioned in both places because it's an iconic place. It's
absolutely. It's in the natural historic landmark, and it epitomizes the gay movement. But also, there's that wonderful little park right there where they have those sculptures of people that are just like staring, and you can get your picture taken. And I had my scarf taken with one of them. I guess he had to be there anyway. So then you have also in the East Village lots of wonderful movies that were filmed. So Taxi Driver, Godfather 2, Ragtime, and Allen Ginsberg, the poet, spent a lot of his time in the East Village, and Greenwich Village and the East Village. The attitude, the culture, the environment is a little bit different. Greenwich Village proper still has phenomenal townhouses, just like the West Village, but also institutions like NYU, and then, but great restaurants and vibrancy in Greenwich Village and Central Village, as well as some of the really, really well-known residential buildings down there. But then East Village has that kind of grungy, kind of younger feel, and some phenomenal bars and restaurants, which we'll talk about in a sec.
Well, there are a few parks of note in the area. Washington Square Park is the most notable park down there. It has the Washington Square Arch, which you see in so many New York iconic cards and paraphernalia that's out there. It's a very recognizable monolith that sits down there. It's beautiful. If you've never seen it up close, I know you have, but if our listeners haven't seen it up close, it is something to go up to and like actually walk around and see. It's something that you would expect to see like in Paris or something, some of their historic landmarks and such. And Washington Square Park is surrounded by NYU, and NYU probably owns most of the real estate in the vicinity there, with the exception of Fifth Avenue, which is at the north side of the park. That's the base of Fifth Avenue going north, that stretch which is called the Gold Coast, from Washington Square Park up to 14th Street. There's some really beautiful old pre-war co-ops and such and buildings in that area. So NYU is sort of certainly one of the stake in the ground institutions that really makes the village a young, very vibrant, very active, on a number of different fronts, very inviting to artists, inviting to creative people. You have down there other creative schools, the New School, et cetera. So there's that youngness sort of breeds all the way over into the East Village. When I lived there, I know it's felt like, most of the people down there are renters. So the real estate is a lot of rental buildings and old tenement buildings and such that have, like I said earlier, a lot of rent stabilized, rent controlled older tenants, but so many rental units, which breeds a lot of young people down there living there that are attending NYU, et cetera. So the other park that I spent a lot of time in, because I lived right around it, is Tompkins Square Park. Tompkins Square Park is over between First Avenue and Avenue A. It's a small park, smaller than Washington Square. Used to be very dangerous, but I moved there in 2002. They cleaned it up. It used to be, populated with homeless people because it didn't close down at night, and it turned into like almost a homeless village at one point. Then they went in probably during the times of Giuliani, I think it was, where he went in and cleaned up the parks. And by the time I moved there, it was very nice park that you can, there's not a lot of green space where you can stretch out on the lawn like in not like Central Park where there's these, vast fields where you can go lay down in the park. But they do rotate. At least when I lived there, they rotate. So you do get little sections of grass where people go and hang out and soak up some sun. So it's nice to have that little bit of green space. I actually lived on the north side of the park, and then the west side of that park, and then back to the north side of that park. So I was always running around that part of the East Village. There's a few others that are sort of sprinkled in there, but besides the parks, we see one of the other things that people should always go and see if they're not, even if they're from New York. It's always interesting to see. There's always characters and such running around there, which is referred to as the cage, which is in the Greenwich Village, and they have these it's a basketball court. There's a handball court there as well, I believe. But the basketball court, they might as well be they're pickup games, but it's very organized now, and they have these really good basketball teams that play each other there in a big chain link surrounded basketball court, which is always fun. I mean, I love getting off the subway there. There's a subway stop right there, and there's always something going on, or at least there used to be. I mean, these days
you have the chess players at Union Square, Union Square, and then you have those handball players that people just stand by and they just watch.
Yep.
Yeah,
in the
cage.
Basketball courts. Yeah,
and the basketball court. Yeah. Also, not just the parks down there, but also schools. So in Greenwich Village, 9th Street, 10th Street, 11th Street, 12th Street, between 5th and 6th Avenue, are some of the most incredible architecture and townhouses. And then you have wonderful, like you were talking about the Gold Coast, phenomenal co-ops down there and condos, mostly co-op. But you'll have, as you mentioned, NYU being the real great anchor, New York University, but then also coveted PS 41, a great school district down there, as well as PS 340. There's the new school down there on, I believe it's West 12th, and then Cooper Union down, which anchors the East Village. There are great private schools down there, like St. Joseph's, Our Lady of Pompeii. There's Grace Church School down there, St. George, St. Luke.
This eclectic mix of people lends itself to a lot of different interesting cultural things, such as theater companies and smaller. There's some small museums that are really interesting to the Salman Gundy. The Center for Architecture has the AI.
Yeah, right. My husband is a member of the Salman Gundy Club, one of the great art clubs in Lower Manhattan. Yep, on the Lower Fifth Avenue. Excuse me.
Yeah. There's a little attraction such as and theater companies like the 13th Street Repertory that has a small place in my heart because I spent a lot of time there when I lived down there. My group of friends, there were a handful of friends that I had that were partaking in some of the productions that they put on. And other attractions are their comedy clubs, actually right around where the cage is in Greenwich Village. There's the Comedy Cellar, probably the most recognizable one where but there's New York Comedy Club. There's
Blue Note
Jazz Club. So a lot of nightlife down in that area. And I think listen, it certainly revolves around the youngness of the people that live there. There is certainly a very large category of young people that are renting down there that go out at night and they want to walk. They don't want to jump in a cab and so on and so forth. So,
and you just to jump in, I'm sure you did, but you mentioned 13th Street Rep, but I also think that it's very important to mention Joe Papp's Public Theater on Lafayette. And you also, I believe, I don't know if we got this in the last clip, but the Blue Man Group.
The Blue Man Group,
So these off-Broadway houses that are really anchors down there and some phenomenal theater that goes on. Over the years, we find our favorite restaurants, like we talked about on the Upper West Side, Luxembourg up there, but Indochine was always one of my favorite restaurants, and it is still there with the models and the actors, and it's a wonderful Vietnamese restaurant right next to Stomp. That's on Lafayette. I haven't been there in 20 years. I'm going back next week, I think. No, actually, no, I can't. I'm going to have Thanksgiving
ones that stick out in my mind from my days there. The Pylos, which is down in the East Village, was mine and my wife's first date together. Fantastic. Formal date. And it's still around. It's a great little Greek restaurant on, I think, 6th Street, just off Tompkins Square.
Love it.
Then there's the spots that I hit all the time when I was down there. There's a little Mexican place called San Loco, which actually had a second. I think they have 2 locations now, at least they did when I moved out, which is a great little place. It's still open. We talked about Katz's Deli, which is just on the south side of Houston, so technically in the Lower East Side, but is associated with the East Village, because you're right on the border there. Yes.
Venero's Bakery. On East 11th Street.
Wait,
it is the best cannolis in all of Manhattan.
Bakery. Oh.
I can throw it in, Venero's, but also phenomenal restaurants. Babot is there. Mama Fuko is there. Noodle Bar. Okay, we can go on and on and on and on and on and on.
We're going to cover 2 ends of the spectrum, because I'm
throwing it all out.
I would throw in Criff Dogs. If you've ever been, it's like a gourmet hot dog place. Not really like gourmet as you would think. Oh, it's a fine dining. It's this little hole in the wall, but you go in there and all they sell is hot dogs. And if you haven't had one, you got to try a bacon wrapped sour cheese dog. It's delectable.
Okay. I'm going to throw this out to you. Veselka, Ukrainian, down on, is it 2nd Avenue? Okay. I grew up with homemade pierogies. You know what a pierogi is? The pockets of dough filled with potato, sauerkraut, prune butter, cottage cheese, whatever, soaked in butter. So when I heard that there was a Ukrainian restaurant, they had homemade pierogies, I would go down there. They'd serve them with applesauce and sour cream. Veselka restaurant. But that's what you're talking about. These kind of whether a hole in the wall or these small eateries. Oh, needless to say, you can't go back down to the Lower East, to the East Village without going to Little India.
I'm amazed that some of these restaurants are still around. I mean, it's such a story of success when a restaurant lasts for 10, 15, 20 years in the city, because it's such a competitive market. And some of these bars, I mean, the oldest pub, Irish pub in New York City, McSorley's. It's 1854. It's been around. It's one of those little things that pieces of New York that if you're visiting New York City, if you live
you got to go.
Ben, you should go check it out. It's probably, I don't think it's been renovated since 1854.
Oh, no. Not at all.
I don't know if they've even washed the glasses since 1854. But it's, you buy these little pints. They're not even pints. They're like 4-ounce glasses of beer. And I don't think they even have any food. It's crazy, but it's like a step back in time. So that would be certainly one of the stops I would say you should make, just to have a beer and just experience it.
Also, there are countless great restaurants and great bars and great eateries and little pockets of these kinds of restaurants and those kinds of restaurants. So we could go on and on and on and on. But just to...
We'll put them all in the show notes, everything that we've talked about and stuff. So if you want to check them out, there's a lot out there to look at. I'm sure there's some new ones that will pop up after we come out of this pandemic. There will be some that go under, and there will be new ones that pop up. So as is the case across the whole city, so it will mix things up a bit.
And before we wrap this up, the Village is so popular, not only because of everything that we talked about, but because it's so central. So you have all the train lines coming into Greenwich Village, whether you're coming in on the west side at the one train, or the AC or the E, or the 6 line, the N and the R, everything kind of converges down there. And it's very easily accessible to Soho and Tribeca, as well as to Union Square and Northern Manhattan. So it's really a wonderful, wonderful central neighborhood. And then the only other thing that I would say is that Greenwich Village has also been known to have some of the most expensive real estate downtown.
Real estate. Let's talk about that.
On the Gold Coast, some of the pricier the pricier co-ops down there, pre-war co-ops, as well as in Greenwich Village, the townhouses are some of the most expensive. And then you'll have, as I mentioned earlier, Greenwich Lane. We'll have we'll have Butterfield House, which we've sold in. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Butterfield House, which was very recognized architecturally back in the
West 1960s, 80s, 60s, I think. Yeah.
Interesting.
But we've sold at Georgetown Plaza. We've sold all over down there.
Yeah. And there's some newer buildings. I mean, listen, there's like Greenwich Lane, but even going further east, there have been some buildings that have gone up as new developments, but there's just not a lot of space for them because a lot of these individually owned buildings or small co-ops, there's a fair number of small co-ops and such. And the zoning does not really allow for these massive, not like the Upper East, Upper West Side where the developers that go in and can go up, 30, 40 stories.
As you can tell, audience, people that are watching and our valued audience, we love Greenwich Village and the East Village.
We do. It's fun to talk about because of my personal having lived there.
And when I first came to New York City, not only was I exploring Broadway and the Upper West Side where I was living, but I've always loved the East Village. I spent a lot of time down there long ago.
So anyway, are you saying, we both spent our 20s down in the Village?
Definitely, without a doubt. So even up till about 30, then things changed. Thank you all for watching. It's been a great week. And Jonathan, I had a blast. I thought I had a blast. I'm hungry. We got to go down to have the Selka for the pierogies. We got to go to Venero's for those cannolis. And then we got to go to the hot dog place for whatever that concoction you told her. And we're going to get the big bottle of Pepto-Bismol. We got to wish everybody happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, next week, have a wonderful Thanksgiving, everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Enjoy the family as you can. Be safe, be healthy. As we said, wrapped around.
Wear your mask and social distance.
Please. And we will be back on December 4th, a week from
I'm going to miss you. I'll miss you.
Well, I'm going to see you probably on Thanksgiving. So
I'll still miss you until then. Be healthy, safe, and most of all,
stay in gratitude.
Always. Have a great week, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching or listening to the John and Jonathan Sell NYC podcast. If you want to find us online or sign up to get our monthly and quarterly market stats, come on over to our website, johnandjonathansellnyc.com, or find us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and everywhere else with the handle @JohnandJonathanSellNYC. And if you want to grab the show notes, go to johnandjonathansellnyc.com/podcast. If this show was entertaining, helpful, or informative, consider telling friends or family or leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts. Those are some of the best ways of supporting our efforts, and we would greatly appreciate it. Thank you again for tuning in. We can't wait to share what's coming up next, so subscribe to the podcast to make sure you don't miss our next episode, and we'll see you next time.